This is Play-by-Playcast,
Is that faster than a Greyhound?
the podcast about play-by-play guys, for play-by-play guys, by, I'm told, a play-by-play guy.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Now here's the host of Play-by-Playcast, Tom Bodett. Wait, the Motel 6 guy?
We'll leave the light on for you.
No, Joel Godet.
Joe Godet.
Joel with an L.
Okay, here's your host, Joel Godet.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
You know, when we recorded that open, Sean Sullivan is the voice guy on that open. He's our associate athletic director for ticketing and marketing and a lot of those external things. Official title there, by the way. Associate AD for ticketing, marketing, and all those external things. Sean and I voiced the open for this podcast in my office some, 16 months ago, and it very organically happened that way. Like, the jokes about the name were in there, but it wasn't scripted like so. It just kind of happened that way, and the amount of comments that I still get just in, like, general passing from people, that's going to stick with me for a while. Unintended consequences of trying to be funny. Trying is the key word there. I got an email. I think it was an email this week, and like it referenced, might have been a text, but it referenced me as Joe with an L, Joel with an L, based off of the opening to the podcast. So that one's going to follow me around for a while. I believe. We'll see how it continues to go. Anyway, my name is Joel Godet. Welcome into Play-by-Playcast. Everybody, thanks for clicking subscribe or download. This is, of course, the podcast about play-by-play guys, for play-by-play guys, hosted by somebody that purports to be a play-by-play broadcaster. Our guest today is the voice of the UAB Blazers. David Crane will be with us here coming up in just a little bit. Ball State football took on UAB this past weekend, so David and I sat down this past Friday in the Schumann Stadium press box and knocked out an episode that you are about to listen to. Quick shout out before we dive into that, though. I was not able to go this year. I went a couple of years ago, and it was a blast, so I'm kind of bummed I wasn't able to make it. WAER, Syracuse student radio station. We've talked about it many times on the pod, so my apologies to everybody who I've beaten over the head with it. But WAER had its Hall of Fame inductions this past Wednesday night. Mike Tirico, Bob Costas, Ian Eagle, all those guys are in the WAER Hall of Fame, have been inducted previously. The year I went, Sean McDonough went in, and Bill Roth went in. And Raftery inducted McDonough, by the way, so you want to talk about good-natured ribbing and some pretty awesome stories. Those were good induction speeches and introduction to his induction speeches. It's about as good as it gets. But many congrats go out to Marv Albert, who is now a WAER Hall of Famer. Syracuse from 60 to 63. Ed Levine, 1978 alumnus of SU. He's the CEO of Galaxy Communications, which is, if you're an upstate New Yorker or a central New Yorker, one of, if not the main, radio cluster that is up in Syracuse, has ESPN Radio in Syracuse, carries the games for the Orange. And Scott McFarland, as much sports pub as SU gets, Scott McFarland is a news reporter, and a really good one, for NBC4 Washington, D.C. So congrats go to Scott, to Ed, to Marv for their induction into the WAER Hall of Fame this past week, or I guess this week. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. David Crane is our guest here on this week's episode of the pod. Episode, 60, I think we're at 65, maybe? 66, I probably just got that wrong. But David Crane is the voice of the UAB Blazers, and, you know, I wanted to have this conversation with him for a lot of different reasons, but one of the things I really wanted to talk about is what we talk about right off the top, and that is not just his situation as a broadcaster, but being part of what he's been a part of over the last 2 years at UAB. If you are unaware of the situation for the Blazers, got to do a lot of research on it this past week and talked about it a lot on the radio with Ball State playing UAB this past Saturday. UAB obviously shuttered its football program, dropped the program back in 2014 and fairly immediately after the season. And then the outcry, both of support and, the outcry of anger, caused basically groundswell in fundraising. They raised $40 million over 15 months. And in 6 months, reinstated the program. The problem is that they had already broken down the infrastructure of the program, basically. The players were gone. They all transferred, able to play immediately. More than 50 guys transferred out. Of course, a whole bunch graduated. 15 guys wound up staying behind and are still on this year's team after not playing over the last 2 seasons. They have one 7th-year senior who has 2 undergraduate degrees and is working on his master's this year. Some of those stories are actually really kind of cool. Another guy was cutting long stem roses at Ace Hardware when he found out the program was brought back. That's what he did for 2 years while not playing college football. But, while football players can transfer out when a program gets shut down or find something else to do for the 2 years to kind of pass the time, be part of the program and its rebuild until it eventually starts playing again, that impacts other people. There's support staff, there's coaches, there's everyone involved with a football program, and that includes the radio broadcaster. In this business, we all strive to get to a certain level, a spot that we like, a level that we like. You want to be on network television. You want to be an FBS voice. You want to be an FBS football voice. There's all these different things that come along with all of our individual goals. I don't even know how many FBS teams there are this year. There were 128 last year. I think 130 this year. There's only that many voices nationally for college sports. And, guys that do football and basketball is even smaller because there are several schools that have them split up. Well, to no fault of his own, David Crane went from being a guy that had one of those jobs to being a guy that didn't have one of those jobs. He went from being 8 years as an FBS football broadcaster to not doing football. It was not on his plate. So I was kind of curious how he dealt with that, how he approached that, and then what it was like getting back in to broadcasting football this season. That on top of the greater story of the reinstatement of the program and the dropping of the program, et cetera, et cetera. But I just kind of thought that David's perspective and David's experience is just a unique piece of the dropping and re-edition of a football program that most people didn't talk about, don't even think about, but for us in broadcasting is something we certainly would be thinking about. So we talk about that. We talk about calling an NCAA men's basketball tournament upset like months after they had dropped the football program. So what that experience was like for him, what it's like being an Alabama Crimson Tide guy. He went to school there, he worked there, getting hired, and now becoming a UAB Blazer and being embraced by that community and what goes into that. We touch on a lot of different topics over the next half hour, 40 minutes with David Crane, our guest this week on the Play-by-Playcast.
I have been a little bit more of a college football fan the last 2 years, and I will admit freely that I'm thrilled to death to be calling football again. It was wonderful to jump on a plane and fly to Muncie for a game this weekend. But there was something to waking up on a Saturday morning, going and playing golf, coming home and watching football and cooking out the rest of it. It was not a bad gig, but it was 2 very long years without getting to come call football games, and I did miss that dearly.
Give me the broadcaster's perspective as all of that plays out, and then as the team eventually gets cut, because there's a lot of different ways that you come at that. I'm sure personally, professionally, being the face and voice of an athletic department, people always ask you about it. What are all the emotions that were attached to you when that happened? It
was difficult, and it was hard on everybody. And we knew, some of us outside of the athletic department, if you will, knew pretty much what was coming a couple of days after the Southern Miss game in 2014. And sure enough, it happened that the program got shuttered. And then you sit around and you think, all right, what are we going to do? What am I going to do? Do I still have a job at UAB? We went through multiple contract negotiations and renegotiations for my company, IMG, to stay at UAB. They wanted to stay regardless, but had to restructure some things. And I'll be honest, there were times that I wasn't sure I was going to still be at UAB. But the university was great to me. IMG was incredibly kind to me to want to keep me around through that 2-year break in football. And of course, still had basketball, still had baseball, TV shows, call-in shows, that kind of stuff. But there was a definite void without football, and there were some days where I wasn't sure exactly where I was going to be working the next year.
If you want to punt on this one, feel free. But I'm curious, just from the personal standpoint, we all work so hard to get to the point where I don't even know what the number is anymore. It was 128 last year. I think it's 130 this year. To be one of those people that is calling FBS level football, and then all of a sudden, to no fault of your own, you're not even calling football anymore. And obviously, it only lasted 6 months, and then you knew that it was going to come back. But in that 6-month window, how much did you wrestle with? What other opportunities are there for me, or is this where I'm okay with this situation, or what else can I add to, be an add-on to what I'm doing at UAB? What are all those broadcaster thoughts running through your head?
You hit them all, really. Do I want to stay? And the answer to that was yes. I wanted to stay because I'm from Alabama. I grew up about an hour north of Birmingham, so I have family there. I still had a ton of friends, obviously, in Birmingham, over in Tuscaloosa as well. So I didn't want to leave, but I also didn't want to not do football again because that is, as you said, that's 130 schools, and not even 130 have one guy that does football and bat. A lot of them split it off, so it's an even more kind of special group to be a part of. So I wanted to stay in that, and I guess I'm lucky that in this field, these jobs don't open up very often. There's not a lot of movement. Once you grab a hold of one of these, everybody fights to keep it.
Legitimately, somebody has to die.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't wish any ill will on somebody, but gosh almighty, when you're coming up through the ranks, doesn't he need to retire? Doesn't he know he sounds awful on the air? He needs to retire so I can have that job. But fortunately, it worked out. There were some uneasy times. There were a couple of opportunities to perhaps go elsewhere. But it worked out, and I'm thrilled to still be at UAB starting my 11th year now.
What was last week like for you? Just from a, oh my God, this is what football is like to broadcast again standpoint. If you want to get wonky on me, is there some stuff that happened and you went, wow, that's a kick in the rear? I forgot that's exactly how this is supposed to go.
I as far as calling the game, I don't think so. I haven't gone back and listened to it. I may not. I'm not sure I want to. But I had some other people listen and say, "Wow, it sounded like you've been doing games for the last 2 years. You didn't sound any different." So I don't think I screwed anything up terribly. I don't think I said he traveled or that's a foul on someone. But last week, just the whole weekend, the build up. You've been waiting basically 2 years for this game. We had a record crowd for a home game come. We had Sam Hunt, who was the starting quarterback my first year at UAB calling games. He came back, did a free concert in front of I don't know how many thousands of people downtown on Friday night. So just the whole weekend was remarkable. And the fact that they went out and actually won the game was just sort of the icing on the cake. But it was a special weekend, and calling a game in front of a big crowd, whether it's a friendly crowd or a hostile crowd, when you've got that atmosphere, it just adds to it, and it certainly did, having 45,000 there.
People always ask me my favorite sport to broadcast, and my answer is always football, because it's an event. It only happens 12 times. It's a big deal. Everybody shows up. There's a lot of hoopla. That's the ultimate hoopla. What was the feel for you doing a game like that? And I mean, you can go to Texas A&M and broadcast in front of 100,000 people. I feel like what you did last week is probably cooler than that in a lot of ways.
It really was, and to see the pictures of the stadium, and Legion Field is a wonderful old 90-year-old stadium that still seats in the neighborhood of 70,000, which is way too big for us, a lot more than we need. But they did a wonderful job of closing off some areas with tarps, and yet it still looked presentable. It looked nice. They had really, jazz the old gray lady up as best they could. And so to have it basically 80% full for what it was designed to hold that day, just looking out and seeing that, something I haven't seen at UAB ever in my time there. And I'm not sure, well, technically, no one's ever seen that at a UAB because it was a school record crowd. But just to see the team run out, hear the crowd roar, it was a truly special day. And I think everybody there felt it and tried to soak it in as best they could, from the pregame tailgate to the Blazer walk with the team coming in. It was remarkable, and everyone that had a small part in it, I hope, went home Saturday night, pat themselves on the back, and had a wonderful stiff cocktail to enjoy the day.
Any pressure? I have to imagine of any UAB game you've ever called, that's probably the most listened to one you've ever had. You ever thinking to yourself, good Lord, I just hope I get this one right?
Going into it, I did think, wow, this, we're going to have a lot of people here. There's going to be a lot of people listening. A lot of attention on the game. Don't screw it up. But once I got into the game, I really I did forget about that, and I tried not to screw it up. But I would say the most pressure I've ever felt in that regard was the NCAA basketball tournament when UAB played Iowa State in the opening round of the tournament. I think it was the first game to tip off. So everybody's watching our game until they switch you around. All of our fans are going to be listening because it's a morning game, and we screwed around and won. So then, as it stayed close throughout, I did start thinking to myself, all right, don't turn into a fan at the end of this. If it gets exciting, just try to stay focused. So that may have been the most tension I felt during a game. But last Saturday, again, the build up to it was so amazing. But once you got into the flow, it felt like you were calling another game.
I'm pretty sure I had Iowa State in my bracket pretty deep that year. So
we caught a lot of grief from a lot of people for shattering brackets on that first day, and we enjoyed every single minute of it.
That's what it's about when you're at this level. You don't want anybody to go home happy other than you. Tell me about coming to UAB. Obviously, you're from Alabama. You're from an hour north of there, and you'd been in Tuscaloosa for a very long time. As a broadcaster, walk me through kind of where you were at with Alabama. And I mean, were you happy there? Was that one of those things where, if nothing else happens, like, I'm good with where I'm at here, but then what winds up that you say, UAB is there? I know it was the second time you had gone out for it. It's the perfect fit. This is the move I need to make.
It's timing, it's environment, it's all those things. I went to school at Alabama. I had been there for a long time. And was enjoying what I was doing. I was doing baseball radio, women's basketball radio, handling part of the pregame and postgame show radio for football. Back then, we were doing a lot of tape delay TV games and still had pay-per-view games that we could do. So I got to do the play-by-play for those. We had a weekly TV show that I hosted. So I was doing plenty, and I was enjoying it. And I had really gotten to the point where something really good is going to have to open up to get me away from here, because not that I wanted to stay at Alabama forever, but again, I had a little bit, I won't go into all the details. I had a unique family situation at that time where I didn't want to get too far away. All my friends, all my family were right there. So I was very happy doing what I was doing. But the UAB job opened up. And I, as you mentioned, I made a run at it the first time, didn't get it. It opened up again a year later, and I just kind of felt like that was kind of a sign. I think a lot of times we do get signs. We have to just be smart enough to realize we're getting a sign and need to recognize it and take advantage of it. And so went out for it, was fortunate enough to get it, and have loved every minute of it. It's different. It's totally different than Alabama was, an SEC school, things like that. But it was mine. It was all mine, and that's what, when you get into this business, if you choose this path, that's what you want to have the opportunity to get a hold of, and it's been a joy.
you're one of those guys where I feel like a fan base can say, he is ours. You sound Alabama. You're from Alabama. You've been around in that market, so to speak, for such a long time. People are already familiar with you. What's there to say about that kind of a person in the role that you have? Obviously, Corey Provis was there before you, is phenomenal at what he does. Comes in that doesn't necessarily have those ties. And I'm very much in that same boat. I am not from Indiana. I'm an East Coast guy, and I came here to Ball State, replaced a guy who had been here his entire life. And there's two kind of very different schools of where guys come from in this business. What's the positives and the best parts about the spot where you're coming from, where people immediately identify with you? And it's not that you kind of grow into that role. They just already know, like, this guy's one of our own.
I think it helps. Coming from Alabama, and I won't go into all the sordid, sometimes bitter history between UAB and Alabama.
I was going to say, they might say this guy's not one of our own, yeah.
And I think there were a lot of UAB fans that probably were not thrilled that they hired another Alabama guy. And I understood that perfectly. I do hope that after 10-plus years that most of them think of me as a UAB guy who happened to go to Alabama and work at Alabama for a while. Made a lot of good friends. The fans have all been really nice to me when you're out and about with them. I'm sure there's some that still don't like me, and just as soon I go back down the road to Tuscaloosa or something like that. But I think there was enough familiarity with me, not that I was a big name by any stretch in Alabama, but I think the UAB fans had probably heard me from time to time. And the fact that I've now been there more than 10 years, I think they realize he's not coming here to make a tape and go somewhere else and think he's much better than we are. Like I said, these opportunities don't come along very often. And if college play-by-play is what you want to do, when you get the chance, you have to jump on it and take it and hold on for as long as you can. And I look forward to some young person down the line saying, "Good Lord, he's awful. He needs to retire. Someone push him out the window so I can have that job." But I hopefully we'll be here for a long, long time.
What do you love about college play-by-play? It's different. There's a decidedly different feel than I came from a minor league baseball background. That's professional. They're playing for themselves, and there's not that collective unity and goal and excitement. Why do you like Saturdays and Wednesday nights and all that comes along with that?
Well, and to be fair, I've never done a pro game, so I can't truly compare what it would be like if I was the voice of the Tennessee Titans or whatever. I do think for the most part, in general, the college fans are just more passionate, and especially in the state of Alabama, about their football and their athletics in general. And I just think it's less of a business. We all know it is a business, a big business. I just think it's less of that at the college level, and I've always enjoyed that. I like pro sports, but as I've gotten older, I watch far less NFL, NBA, and baseball than I used to. So I like the college game. I like the college atmosphere. And I think the environment surrounding the games is it's just different. It is. And different, not necessarily in a bad or good way, but it's different, and that's what I've grown up with. We don't have a pro team in Alabama. So that's really all we've ever known is college football and college sports.
It's the religious nature of it, I think, is what really stands out.
There is, at times, to a scary degree, a bit of religiousness surrounding college sports. They love it. And, you go to Tuscaloosa and there's 100,000 people in the stadium and probably 25,000 more outside just tailgating. And that's 6, 7, 8 times a year. same way at Auburn, and that's what we want. That's what we want at UAB. We want the UAB football ticket to be a tough one to get, and we want to see people showing up 4 hours before to tailgate in the parking lot. And I think last Saturday we saw that. And the trick for us now as a department and people that love UAB, we got to keep pushing that in the right direction and growing that so it's not a one-time deal.
What makes good football on the radio?
That's a great question. I guess some people would say offense, a lot of scoring, which it helps. Everybody likes a good touchdown call or a long run or a deep pass, something like that. But golly, big defensive plays, sacks, fumbles, whatever. We had a pick six from a 340-pound defensive lineman last week that I thought was going to bring the house down. So I think the big plays, and still, again, the youthful excitement that you see from college kids when they make a big play. And the band. You got the marching band in the stadium. I guess the Redskins still have their band, but a pregame show and a halftime show with a marching band, that adds to it all. And I think it all sort of comes together to hopefully, and if you're a decent play-by-play guy, you can incorporate all of that and pass that passion along to the folks that aren't there listening.
Yeah, the right crowd mic and the right situation does totally make a difference, because I agree with you 100% on the band aspect of that. Technical standpoint, what's important to you? What's at the top of your list? I mean, everybody always says time and score and all of that. But what do you focus on, and what defines a quality broadcast along those lines?
The basics. Time, score, down, distance. And I think it may not, I don't want to say it's less important. With all the games, for the most part, being televised or streamed, most people can see it. But I've always felt when I listen to other announcers, you can tell a radio guy. And you can tell a guy who's more TV slanted that may be calling radio. And that's part of it. I think that the down and distance, time and score, that's all part of it, because most times for TV it's up on the screen, you can see it. You don't have to worry about that as an announcer. But I think just the basics. Keep everybody listening, fully involved in the game. And I think sometimes guys, and I fall into it as well, you try to do too much. You try to squeeze too much into a call, and you don't do it justice. Just keep it simple. Keep it basic. What direction are they going? Yard lines. I fight like crazy to make sure I get the 12-yard line and not the 17-yard line, because they can trick you from time to time when you're up high. Where's the ball on the field? The more you can squeeze in without missing the important stuff, I think the better it sounds. But it's a fine line to try to not do too much. Just call the game, get the necessary information in, and then as the flow continues. And I would say this, you're seeing these offenses now that go so fast. It may make it easier for us because you don't have time to get cute and try and describe too much, because they're lining up, snapping the ball again. So the flow of the game, the style of the game, the style of the offenses, I think has a direct impact on how we do our jobs.
The funny part about that is I listened back to Ball State and Illinois last week, our opener, and Ball State started huddling this year, which was new. And the first drive of the second half was a touchdown drive for us. We finished it. I was like, I thought that was good. I'll go back and listen to it. And there's just times where Rich, my analyst, stops talking, and there's just silence. And I didn't I didn't know what to do
out there. What are they doing? And we're the same way.
There was no formation to describe. No, we're there yet.
Why are you doing this? Why are you taking all this time? But and that's something that all announcers have had to get accustomed to with these hurry up no huddle offenses. And I joked with our analyst Steve Irvine, and I told him, look, you need to enjoy the pregame, and you need to get all your good stuff in the pregame, because once these games start, unless we find a team that huddles and we get some time to talk, you're not going to have a whole lot of time to jump in. So the new offenses have probably hurt the analysts more than they've hurt the play-by-play guys.
We're not upset about that on this side, though.
Well, absolutely not.
Tricks for identifying defense. One of the things I wanted to focus on last week was I wanted to call out a little more D, because I get bored with Riley's in the eye, or Riley's in the gun, 2 receivers left. It's Hall in the slot, Wakanaria's left to the boundary alone, and that's where your eyes immediately go. Do you call out a lot of defense and sets and kind of maybe what a coverage looks like, or what corners on, or I guess what other ways do you vary up to not get monotonous or repetitive in your pre-snap description? And
it's tough, again, because of the offenses. You have to focus on the offense to begin with. And if they give you time to sprinkle in, is it a 4-man front, 3-man front? I think it's easier, and fans may be a little more accustomed to hearing the offensive formations. And it's a little easier to visualize 3 receivers right, 1 left, single setback or whatever. You look at a defense, and they're moving around a lot. It could be a 4-man front. No, they drop 1 back, so it's a 3-4, or is it a 4-2-5? I think it's just easier formation-wise to stick to the offense. And certainly you throw in, 3rd and 10, nickel situation. You got 5 DBs, 6 DBs. I just think it's easier to focus on the offense and, again, sort of sprinkle in the defense to break up the monotony. Now, they line up 11 across the front. Well, that's easy to notice. Even I'm smart enough to pick up, wait a minute, that looks different defensively. But, again, you have to sprinkle it in because all eyes are on the ball. And I'm always impressed by the analysts, mine and everybody else's, because I'm watching the ball. Where is the ball? And if the ball's in the air, I'm watching the ball in the air. And I'm always impressed by the analysts who say, yep, that's a great pass, but boy, he had so-and-so wide open to the other side of the field. Things that maybe a lot of play-by-play guys better than I am can see that as it's happening. But I do focus so much on the ball. It's hard to see a lot of other things, and that does include the defense, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's always amazed me, too. Anytime a play's over, and he's like, well, the reason is because, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, what? I'm not sure I got the guy who had the catch right. Like,
right. Who has the ball? Which of these 6 running backs did we sneak in there? With the lousy numbers on these uniforms, who's got the ball?
You guys have good numbers, right?
We had good numbers last week. We went with all green uniforms, which I'm not a big fan of the monochrome look, but did have big white numbers, which helped. Names on the back, which helped. Tomorrow, I'm afraid it may be white jerseys with gold numbers, and I wish you the best, and I wish myself the best trying to track who's in and who's out.
As Rich, my analyst, would say, that should not be allowed.
Every head coach should have to sit down with the sports information guys who are on the stat crew and the radio guys and even the TV guys and say, before you decide on a uniform, we get to go to the stadium, we get to come to the press box, you hold up the jersey to us on the field, and we give you a thumbs up or thumb down if you can order those uniforms.
Well, they've got to know. They've got to ID their own guys, too. They got to watch the film. Like, what do you...
Right, and none of them ever think, those numbers really are hard to... They all know who they sent in there, but... Do they think about us who are really trying to work? We were the last ones they ever think of.
We played Western Michigan, and they luckily have new uniforms now because they sold the Row the Boat. But when PJ Fleck first got there, they had italicized like gold on white, and the jersey is always crunched up, so you had no idea.
We went to Western Kentucky in 2014. Night game, gold pants, white jerseys, the gold numbers, and their radio guy stuck his head in my booth. First time I'd ever really met him, and he said, "Those uniforms are atrocious. How are we supposed to see those numbers?" And I apologized. I said, "I know they're terrible." Western comes out in all red uniforms with black numbers. And I stuck my head, walked right back down the hall and said, "Hey, Chief, you're not doing me any favors either with that get up you got on down there." And I'm sorry. We're even.
That's like when Louisville wore the gray on black, I think, a few years ago. And that's why I have TV monitors in here. Let's go to a sport where you're a little bit closer to the action, though. And let's talk a little bit of basketball. And I want to talk about the NCAA Tournament game, if I can, as well. And I mentioned this actually on this past week's episode of the pod. And it's something that Joe Davis tweeted about a bunch right after Rich Hill's near perfect game, near no-hitter, almost shutout. And that's the thing that Vin Scully told him, is that in the bigger the moment, the calmer you have to be. Can you recall for me just your mindset when you realized we're going to pull this thing off?
Going back to what I said earlier, I was a little nervous to start the game. That was my first men's NCAA tournament game. I'd done a couple of women's NCAA tournament games. And there is a definite feel when you show up, and the NCAA catches a lot of grief for a lot of things they do, and some rightfully so, some not justified. The NCAA basketball tournament is one of the greatest spectacles in sports, and just to be a part of it is amazing.
Like Nance is 2 seats down. It's
right, and my bitterness for announcers really only rears its head around that time because Jim Nance calls the Final Four and then hops on the plane to Augusta. And that's just not fair. That's not right for one guy to get to have a week quite like that. But you're in Louisville, a basketball town. You're in this great building, and you play a team that everybody thinks is maybe a Final Four team. So you've got all that going into it, and didn't get off to a great start, but sort of settled down, chipped away, and you get into the second half, you get midway through the second half, that under 8 timeout, and at that point, this is a game, it's going to come down to the wire. These are two good teams. UAB is playing great, especially defensively. Iowa State is not shooting it anywhere the way they did in the Big 12 tournament the week before. So there's going to be a finish. Just don't screw it up. Don't trip over yourself. And I would say in that situation, default to keep it simple. Just call the play. Don't. In basketball, I do think you can take your eyes off the ball and try to look and serve, try to see where the pass is going or something like that, and you can screw it up. And so I do think in that scenario, my thought was just follow the ball, call what you see, and wait for if something great happens at the end, call it, and then scream like a little girl when it's all said and done, and enjoy it. But it was a nerve-wracking 2+ hours to be on the air and to we all, every swinging one of us, wants to hear one of our calls on ESPN radio or CBS the next. And if anyone says they don't care, they are lying. And so the trick then was, all right, I don't want to have whatever I'm going to say partially scripted so it sounds ridiculous on the air. But, man, I sure would like to be on CBS tomorrow morning if this goes our way. And so just, again, try to enjoy it. Keep it simple. Call what you see and hope your team wins and you get to enjoy it.
Did you make it onto CBS?
I did.
Do you have it DVR'd still?
I don't. I have it. I was on the treadmill that next morning when CBS signed on. And I kind of had an idea because the folks in our studio said, hey, we've gotten a bunch of calls wanting the end of the game. And so they started their day 2 coverage with that. And then, was it Georgia State?
Yes.
Knocked off Baylor. So
and what's his name? God, what was his name? Ron Hunter knocked him right out of his chair. That was the call. Yeah.
Thankfully, UAB had beaten Iowa State about 10 minutes before that game ended. So we got to have the spotlight for about 10 minutes before Georgia State stole it away from us. But I think that's how CBS opened the Friday coverage, was with my call and then the end of the Georgia State-Baylor game, which that's a treat. That's a treat.
Do you remember what you said?
It was one of those, we hit a shot to take the lead, and then timeout. And I'm
going to have great tape here, and now it's 20 minutes long.
Yeah, and then Iowa State inbounds. You know, I'm embarrassed to say I don't even remember the score, but they needed a three, and they missed a couple of threes, and then one of their guys tipped it in with 0.1 seconds. And so at that point, it's over. I mean, it's over for the most part. We just got to inbound it. Somebody's got to touch it. And so I think we threw it in, three-quarter court heave or whatever. Somebody knocked it away. And I do remember seeing myself throwing my hands up on the replay of the game on press row. And I think it was the madness begins or something along those lines.
You said you didn't want to script something out and get caught sounding ridiculous on television, but I mean, are you sitting there in the under four? Like, are there thoughts running through your head like, okay, if this happens, this is where I want to be, or this is the general ballpark that I want to be coming from?
I think so. I think when you know you have that opportunity, and there's some guys, that, Eli Gold at Alabama, who's called 97 national championship games.
And we'll call another 10.
And he doesn't have to worry about what he's going to – but he's done it so long. He's been in that situation so many times. It's easy for him. It's my first time in knowing what could potentially happen in a situation like that. So I did. I started thinking that under 4 timeout, all right, you've got to be ready for this because it very well may happen. It could be a buzzer beater. It could be whatever. So, try to at least get something in mind. But again, I didn't want it to be scripted and sounding like I had written it at the under 4 timeout and had to fumble to get out my card to read what it was I had written down. So I think excitement is part of what makes what we do great. And you can tell when someone is just coming unglued. They are so excited, and it's natural. And then you can tell when somebody's not necessarily faking it, but has been trying to prepare for it and make it sound a certain way, I think.
David, it's been a lot of fun, but I will let you. I don't know how you got here, but your team is gone, so I'll let you go on that note.
The team has left. They have headed to Indianapolis. Thankfully, I've got a rental car, so we'll be following them shortly. But looking forward, it's a great venue. This is a wonderful stadium. We would dearly love at UAB to pick this up and bring it back with us to Birmingham and drop it on campus where we could play our games. But it's a treat to be up here, and as I said, it's just good to be calling football again.
That's David Crane joining us here on Play-by-Playcast, the voice of the UAB Blazers. It did not go well for UAB, by the way, on Saturday, and it's going to be tough. And I'm very curious to follow kind of how that program goes, because they had almost 45,000, a school record in attendance for the return of the program in their opener against Alabama A&M, and they ran over them, an FCS program. But then they got beat by us, and they're good. I mean, my analyst on Radio for Football thought that in a lot of ways they were better than Illinois, who Ball State lost to by a couple of points, field goal in week 1. They've got some talent. But it's an interesting social melting pot experiment because it's all these, in a lot of cases, junior college players and a handful of true freshmen, just a handful, a bunch more redshirt freshmen, and then some Division I transfers sprinkled in, kind of coming together and trying to make a team. You talk about building culture in programs, and that takes time. And the older players teach the younger ones. They don't really have that at UAB. It's all these guys coming from all these different places and all these different walks of life trying to mesh and basically tie themselves into this quilt of a team and a program to jumpstart them. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out because they're going to win some games. And I know their goal is to go to a bowl game, as most teams' goals are in college football. I will be very curious to see if and how that all happens and comes together. So best of luck to David Crane as far as their season is concerned, and then his call of that season as well. For those prep wonks out there, and I got some notes last week about the prep talk and the prep nuggets with Kristen Airy. One other note on David Crane. He's doing the game, and he breaks out this binder. I'd never seen it before. I probably had, but I never really thought about it. This binder that is like 11 by 16, or maybe 4. It was big. It was the biggest binder I've ever seen. Long. And then he had basically 3 ring punched, offense, defense for each team, and could basically flip through them. And it was just a departure from the old kind of manila folder that I go with, and that a lot of us go with. And I liked the fact that he could flip and that he had it in a binder and it was organized, and you always know where everything is. I've got some additional sheets to my prep that are not on my manila folder. So I kind of liked that everything was locked into one place. So if you have prep questions and you want to pick David's brain about his prep, ask about the binder, because it's not a big deal. It's something small, but to all broadcasters, how we prep is a big deal. So if there's other things that intrigued you in the podcast, certainly reach out to David on Twitter for that. But if you're curious about the binder prep, I thought it was cool. It was different and something I haven't really seen a lot. I've seen normal binders, but this one was big, and basically put a regular chart in a binder, which I don't know why it's making me so excited, but I thought it was cool. So I'll end it on that note with David Crane. Don't have the guest yet for next week. If you want it to be you, let me know. We've got time to sit down and knock one out before then. But in the meantime, many thanks to you for clicking subscribe or download. Many thanks to David Crane for joining us, and good luck to him and the Blazers the rest of the way. That'll do it for us, though, today. Hit it, Marshmallow. We're out.